Hi there, good evening. I'm Dietmar Winsker. I will be presenting the webinar. Welcome to everybody. I think the question I want to ask here this evening, what do we want in terms of health? Well, I think what we mostly aspire to is vitality and performance and fitness, mental and physical performance. Yes, we want our health, although it's very difficult to describe what that is definition wise, but we all know when we have it. We certainly know when we don't have it. But I think what we're all after is quality of life. And especially as one gets older and one sees aging and all the ramifications of aging, then quality of life is probably the highest good you can have as you get older. What do the following pictures have in common? And I'm going to run through them very quickly. It's a rhetoric question, of course, but I just want to show you. Back pain, high or low blood pressure problems, non-healing wounds, diabetes 2. In other words, you're not born with diabetes, but it's an acquired diabetes. Sleeplessness. I'm surprised how many of my friends, my contemporaries, already suffer from a lot of sleeplessness. Now, it could be worries, it could be concerns about all sorts of things, but there could be other reasons for it too, more physiological reasons. Migraine and headaches are not unknown, and some people suffer from them for years. Yes, really, for years. I'm surprised that that exists. As a person who's always been blessed with good health, I'm actually regularly surprised how much suffering there is of all sorts of things. The word migraine is for me just a word. I don't know, fortunately, what that really is in terms of experiencing it, although I've had the odd headache. Tinnitus, this continuous noise in your ear, um, those are things that bother some of us. Depression, it is such a general thing today that it's almost seen as as part of the fallout of civilization, at least in the West. Multiple sclerosis, much more widespread than I ever thought. And possibly it is because one is in the health business that you have more contact to such things. Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is really a debilitating ailment. And I've come across many people with that already. Chronic fatigue syndrome. There are days when I think I got it. But fortunately, because of the Bemer, as you will see later, I recover pretty quickly. So it never becomes chronic, really. But kidney ailments are also very frequent. And fibromyalgia, which, although I got this picture of the internet somewhere, the trigger points that are indicated there with red dots, when I've spoken to a neurologist, he says fibromyalgia is a very, very difficult ailment, but it is actually a malfunction of the control center in the brain that manages all the sensory inputs that you get into your brain. And that gets very confused if every little bump and nick and feeling and emotion and input through the eyes, ears, touch, whatever, is channeled through that one tiny little part of the brain, and there is a bit of an overload, and then the pain comes out all over. Anyway, it's a more difficult explanation that I could give you, but I just wanted to mention it. Fibromyalgia, an ailment that many people suffer from. Nobody really knows how to treat it, or that is what I pick up. But I may be wrong. There may be physicians who can treat this. Neurologists apparently know exactly what it is. Most GPs look for the other symptoms and try and treat them. Fractures and broken bones. Remember, I'm just giving you a listing here. Osteoporosis. What is common with all these things, including osteoporosis and rheumatism and things like arthritis? And all these ailments have causes at cellular level. That's why I put them up there. And I'm sure there are many, many, many more, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of ailments that really have their cause at cellular level. And at cellular level, you must understand, we consist of about 100 million individual cells, each one specialized and there for a specific job, building specific proteins and other chemicals and doing their thing. But if that cellular metabolism, and what we mean by that is really the chemistry inside there, which is meant to work according to a very fixed structure and order, a very fixed process, if that is not working well because of poor energy production at cellular level, and this energy in the cell is a chemical called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And that adenosine triphosphate is generated with little generators inside the cell and then used up to give a good cellular metabolism. But if the metabolism is bad, it's because of poor ATP production. And the ATP is produced by oxygen and nutrients. And if that doesn't work because there's poor blood circulation, then we've got a problem. But you see, I put this explanation in reverse. It really starts with poor blood circulation, which reduces the oxygen supply, which reduces the energy production, which results in poor cellular metabolism. And as you will see during the course of this webinar, that means many cells are not doing what they're meant to do. And the signal your brain gets is pain or some other discomfort, as you will see in a moment. Now, of course, our medical world treats symptoms, and that is understandable. I always want to emphasize that with the Bemer, I'm not talking against medicine or physicians or the way the world is put together in a medical sense. However, symptoms are something that we can sense, that we can feel, and usually it's in the form of pain or some uncomfortable feeling of some sort, a pressure or maybe a sharp pain, whatever it might be. However, long before we have these symptoms, it is my viewpoint that there are a lot of unnoticed developments down there in the body that actually cause these symptoms. But because they are unnoticed, we don't know something is happening. If we have impaired blood circulation, now you must know the blood is a transport highway, a transportation highway for the oxygen and for the nutrients. And if that isn't working for whatever reason, in terms of open flow channels, in terms of sufficiency, in terms of blocked areas to certain tissues or certain organs, then the next step is that there will be an oxygen insufficiency. Because if the blood cannot get right down into the capillaries, then there will not be enough oxygen to let the cell metabolism in the area of those particular capillaries function well. Now, if there is oxygen insufficiency, that means the ATP production that I mentioned earlier on, the energy production at cellular level, is in trouble. And if that happens for a longer period of time, it could become chronic. Now, if you're 20 or 30, you recover very quickly from a temporary shortage of ATP production. The body is resilient, it is young, it can fix these things relatively easily. And for a short time, it can do very well with a lower level of oxygen or even anaerobic situation, an anaerobic situation, as you see in high performance sports very easily. Of course, if that carries on and on and on, the cell chemistry isn't working very well anymore, and more cells will start to dysfunction. All that means is that these cells that are programmed to do a certain thing do not get the energy to do what they're meant to do. It's like when you have got no gas or petrol in your car anymore, it will not be able to perform. It's that simple and as profound as well. And so if there are more and more cells in one particular organ that are, in good old vernacular language, packing up, if they pack up, and so let's say they are in the pancreas, then you have a whole couple of millions of cells not producing enough insulin. And then for the first time, you have a symptom, and the doctor will examine you and find that you have the onset of diabetes too. So I hope you could follow this. And I drew it like an iceberg because the symptoms are really only the tip. There's stuff going on down at the bottom. And the real problem is lifestyle. And I'm as guilty as the next person. Guilty in inverted commas, some of it is intentional, by volition, and some of it is just circumstances. But lack of regular exercise is definitely one of them, because we have predominantly sitting activities. Poor breathing habits. I think even I, with the age of 63, can still not breathe properly. But I've never smoked, so there I've got one advantage. There's psychological stress because we all have spouses, employers, employees. We've got road traffic. We've got chasing deadlines, etc. There's environmental stress from the air we breathe, especially in the big cities. There's environmental stress in terms of noise pollution, air pollution, water pollution in some areas. And then there's, of course, malnutrition in the sense that us in the Western world, it's not that we don't have enough. In fact, we have too much to eat, too many calories, too little exercise, poor breathing habits, and all these things. And so we end up like these five characters there in the cartoon, as you can see. And it's not a pretty picture. The common factor of all these things, or the common underlying factor of this, is poor circulation, poor blood circulation, and resulting lack of oxygen. And the lack of oxygen is a major problem for the body. As you know, we can live without food maybe up to 40 days or longer, but not without oxygen. There we are counting the time in seconds or minutes at the most. And of course, the other one is poor nutritional habits and lack of motion, locomotion. I move a lot in aeroplanes and cars and boats, but I do not use my own 2 feet, or not too often at least. You know, they say the average distance that a person walks these days in the Western world is 800 meters. That's what, 900 yards or less per day. So, in the past, we did a lot of exercise in the fresh air. Today, little exercise, poor nutrition. You come home, you're exhausted, you're stressed out, and all you can do is eat some fast food, have some probably unhealthy drink, and fall asleep on the couch in front of the television. We should be doing exercise in the fresh air and not watching others do exercise in the fresh air on television. But you know all that. Let's get back to basics. For our bodies to function properly, we require oxygen and nutrients, as you know. We also require sufficient amounts of water because our bodies consist about 67% of water. The brain, as terrible as what it sounds, is about 98% water. How's that for putting us back on the ground? The oxygen and the nutrients are converted to this ATP at cellular level so that this very highly complex molecular chemistry can really proceed according to the program. And this chemical process, which we can call metabolism, generates waste products, and toxins possibly have to be removed also from the cells. And for that, we need a blood circulation system, and the lymphatic system also has a big role in this. And so what is sketched there schematically as the whole blood circulation system is really the body's transportation highway for all materials that have to go to the cells and have to be removed from the cells. So at this level, biology isn't difficult. But don't be fooled. Biology is extremely complex, much more complex than anything I have ever done in engineering. And I did some pretty complex things in my career. Now, blood circulation is essential. Blood circulation means 15,000 liters a day that our heart has to pump through our bodies, and about 1,200 liters a day go through the brain alone. That's quite something. And this heart isn't very big, but that circulation is essential. But if you think that we have 120,000 kilometers, that's probably what, 90,000 um, 90,000 miles or so of blood vessels, of which 75% consist of diameters of less than a fifth of a millimeter. That is the microcirculation. And here comes the big, miracle in a way. The heart alone cannot possibly pump the blood through 120,000 kilometers of blood vessel. You need other mechanisms to promote the flow of blood through the smaller and smaller blood vessels right down to the capillaries, and the capillaries um, are right down to about 7, or let's be generous, 10 thousandths of a millimeter. And the heart must pump, but it cannot pump through those small pipes. So we need other mechanisms. Let's call it the microcirculation. Now, what the Bemer does is something very physical and very simple. It triggers the body so that it can regain its self-healing effect. Because let's face it, the body is self-healing. With all due respect to the medical profession, the body itself is capable of healing itself, but the medical profession, and the Bemer for that matter, and other modalities only enable the body to heal faster. Now, this self-healing effect needs a stimulated microcirculation, because that microcirculation has to get the essential supplies to and remove the other substances from the cells. When that is all working, especially the oxygen and the nutrients getting there, then at the bottom of this little cycle, we have an improved energy production. That means better ATP production. And this better ATP production at cellular level means that the biological chemistry at molecular level works so much better. No, not just so much better. It actually works the way it is meant to work. And if that is all working, then the regulation processes by which the body controls its own body temperature continuously, hormone levels, digestive processes, brain processes, you name it, blood pressure, high, low, whatever, the body knows how to regulate it. It is built in, it is in the DNA. So when this little cycle, as simple as what it looks, but as profound as what it is in its working, if that cycle is working well, then everything is well. And the last time it was like that is probably when you were 20, So it has maybe changed a little bit over the years. So the Bemer improves this microcirculation by giving a physical trigger to the body to help the smallest blood vessels in a dilation and contraction motion, which we call vasomotion, to push the blood forward. And it opens capillaries, this tiny network of tiny little blood vessels, of which in the point of a ballpoint pen, just sort of to get a wow factor here, there are about 3,000 to 5,000 individual capillaries inside the volume of the ball of a ballpoint pen. Now you'll have a bit more respect for your body again, maybe. Now, 75% of our blood vessels, as I said, are of this small diameter size. The Bemer also improves the energy production because it gets the oxygen to the cells. And these little engines here, this green rotating chemical engine that lives in the mitochondria, in their thousands, in each cell, they produce this ATP, which is a substance that gets immediately used up by the cell again to do the functions the cell has to do. And this energy production, if you could heap it all on one heap of ATP, imagine a big bag of ATP that is about your body weight. And that gets generated and used up within seconds every single day in your body. And that's why you need oxygen, and that's why you need nutrients. The Bemer also has a tremendous effect on partial oxygen pressure. And this graph that I've shown you here, if you look at the top here, the vertical axis is the partial oxygen pressure, which is really just the component of the air that is due to oxygen. So there's a bit of an old-fashioned way of measuring pressure here. Millimeters of mercury is very old-fashioned. Only medical people and pilots still use millimeters of mercury, really. And that's the vertical axis. And on a horizontal axis, we have the biological age of the people under consideration. And what a professor in Germany has done in the 50s is he's just taken a couple of thousand people off the street, plotted their partial oxygen pressure, which is relatively easy to measure, although measured indirectly, but it can be measured very easily. He determined this top curve, which starts at about 96 to 98 millimeters of mercury. And you see that by the time this person is 50 years old, it has reached that critical level, 80 millimeters of mercury, which is really the cutoff point for intensive care units at hospitals. As soon as a patient drops below 80 millimeters of mercury, the nurses and the doctors start running to try and get that back up. But you also see that this curve goes down. By the time you're 80, it is below 70. And that is a direct indication of how much oxygen will be absorbed by your body. So it stands to reason that if we could get the partial oxygen pressure up back to 96 millimeters of mercury, even if you're 50, 60, or 70 or 80 years old, that would be great. Then we had a lot more oxygen available. Now, when people have serious ailments, they sometimes go into hyperbaric chambers, and hyperbaric chambers are really nothing other than to increase the partial oxygen pressure. People are under high pressure in these hyperbaric chambers, and more oxygen is meant to go through the body in the natural way via the lungs to alleviate whatever the problem might be, from wound healing to asthma to all sorts of other things. Now, the interesting thing is, if you take people with a very, very low partial oxygen pressure, and here is an experiment that was done somewhere in Europe, where they took a couple of guys and their average was 70 millimeters of mercury, partial oxygen pressure, and they treated them on the old Bemer 3000 for a whole 8 minutes a day. Then over time, if you see the treatment here in weeks of 6 weeks, but a daily treatment of 8 minutes, every single person in that group that had an average of 70 was suddenly up to where they should be. And that value, what it should be, varies a little bit with the altitude that you're living at. So in Denver, it will be a bit lower than in LA. But it varies relatively little for you and me. But the interesting thing is that every single person after 6 weeks was back there, which was, let's say, ideal. And that is an amazing thing. So we have seen a couple of things that the Bemer does that are very conducive for our body's chemistry at molecular level to work much better. And here we've got another one, the last one I want to show you. Erythrocytes are the red blood particles that are the carriers of the hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin has the amazing ability, it has a very high affinity for oxygen. And as it goes through the alveoli in the lungs, those are the places where the blood rushes past the air that we breathe in, and it pops the oxygen onto the hemoglobin, and then it travels through the body and delivers it in the capillaries, if the capillaries indeed are open. Now, this picture there that you see that was taken with a dark field microscope shows these erythrocytes, and they are clumped together. Now, when they're clumped together, it has two implications. The first one is it can never get through a capillary because a capillary is only the diameter of about one of those red erythrocytes. So when they're clumped together like that, is you'll have a blocked pipe very quickly. The second one is that they are in each other's way because the hemoglobin ports on each erythrocyte are blocked by the other one. So when this lot goes past the lungs, it can't even pick up the oxygen, even if you're in a hyperbaric chamber. And this is what happens after a very short time of Bemer. These erythrocytes separate, and now that has the implication that all the hemoglobin ports are open, and the erythrocyte can actually squeeze through a capillary. And there an amazing thing happens. The oxygen is actually literally squeezed out momentarily from the hemoglobin, and it migrates to the cells, and it's used up in the ATP production. So I'm trying to put this very simply. It is, of course, much more complex, the whole story. But we have now said if there is good blood circulation, and there is, because there's 75% is microcirculation, that we have a flow that is really working. If we have a good enough partial oxygen pressure, and the red erythrocytes are enabled to transport the oxygen through those capillaries towards the cells, then the cells have a chance to produce ATP. That in turn means the cells can do what they're meant to do according to program. And if that is working in the whole body, then ideally speaking, all regulation systems, self-healing systems can get down to work and do what they have to do. So, macro and micro circulation, most important. It improves the oxygen supply. That also implies, when all the piping is open, that there's an improved oxygen extraction. That in turn results in increases in energy production at cellular level. That means more effective cell biology, and in the end, we have self-regulation. So I think this little logic, and it is logical for you, I hope, is not difficult. The stuff behind it is the stuff of many PhDs in biology. There is no doubt about it. And that's essentially all the Bemer does. And it does it with a very cleverly tuned, pulsating, direct current, low intensity magnetic field. And what makes the Bemer different from other alternative modalities is that it is scientific. It is scientific because everything the Bemer does can be measured. It's not something that you either believe in or don't believe in. It's not something that is a little bit esoteric. No, every parameter that the Bemer claims to influence can be measured. The measurement is repeatable on the same person or on different persons, and the answers are within a small margin of error and experimental variation consistent. So if something is quantifiable, repeatable, and consistent, it is scientific, at least for a guy like me with my background. What the Bemer does is relatively ordinary. Ordinary in the sense that what I've explained to you just now, any layperson can understand. I've understood it. But it is extraordinary in its essence and in its effect. And the other thing that what is amazing on the Bemer is that it acts at the cause and not the symptom. And the cause, we said, is the blood flow, the oxygen, the ATP, the cell health, and organ health. It is very gentle and safe in its effect, because the effect is always there if you feel it or not, and it is gentle. It's not a brutal intervention like maybe a chemical that you swallow in a pill, especially if you have a handful of pills where, as far as I understand, nobody on this planet knows the combination of pills' effect on the body. We know possibly what the effect is of the ingredients of a single pill, and possibly even the interaction of two different pills, but only in very specific cases, because you got so many thousands of permutations. But if you have more than 3 pills, forget it. Nobody can tell you the probable interaction of these chemicals in one body. But be that as it may, the Bemer is gentle and safe in its effect. It has no negative side effects. But the results are massive. When I say massive, what I mean is that I'm in this business for 13 years. And I know that that doesn't constitute a medical trial. That doesn't even constitute more veracity just because I say so. However, if you watch people with all sorts of ailments and they've tried all sorts of things, medical and otherwise, and they get no relief, and they have the Bemer for a relatively short while, and they recover wonderfully, then I would say there is something going on here that should be investigated. This is not a make-believe thing. So these results are massive. I know in the United States, and I take it there are quite a few from the United States listening in, this is almost like heresy talking like this. You're not allowed to say that. Somebody would sue me. But let me tell you, this is my personal opinion. So, you know, and it's something that I've seen. Doesn't make it true, of course. I understand that. It's not a scientific test that has said it's anecdotal. But you know what? Our whole medical world runs on anecdotal. There are a couple of clinical trials, but the day-to-day treatments are actually anecdotal. And so is the Bemer. But it is definitely, what is the word called? Evidence-based medicine. There's no doubt about that. So for which conditions will the Bemer work? Virtually all ailments. Oh, and that's a big problem, of course. How can it work on everything? Well, it can work on everything because we are improving something at the very, very low end of the scale, the most basic stuff at cellular level. And that is affected, I mean, every ailment is affected by that state of the cells. Actually, it's the other way around. Every negative cell will give you some or other symptom if there are enough cells having the same problem. Anyway, virtually all ailments can be improved. Also, where an immune system has to be improved, that's where the Bemer can help. You wouldn't want to use it on a person who's just had a freshly transplanted kidney because you don't want to improve the immune system because you get rejection. But where a strengthened immune system matters, the Bemer will work. And where microcirculation is the key parameter, it will work. As all cells depend on an effective supply of oxygen, you've understood that by now, and nutrients, and the removal of waste products. And sick cells, in big enough numbers, in a particular area in the body, give rise to symptoms, and then self-regulation and self-healing is impaired because many of these regulation processes are sort of controlled and governed by more than one place in the body. I know that the medical guys tell me that blood pressure is regulated by at least 20 different factors in the body. Now I ask you, if you've got high blood pressure and there are 20 switches with which you should actually work, and they're all interdependent as well, then which switch are you going to fiddle? And yet I have the feeling that a specific pill will activate one or two of these switches, but who says it's the right one? The Bemer doesn't touch any of those switches. The Bemer says, here's an organism that suffers because of lack of circulation. It suffers lack of oxygen. It suffers lack of ATP. It cannot regulate these things properly. But if we enable it to get more oxygen so that it can produce more energy, then many, not all, but many of these problems can be alleviated and the body can do its own controlling and self-healing again. And I'm sure you can understand that. So improving the microcirculation and improving oxygen extraction gives, let me put it mildly, hope for alleviating headaches and migraine, tinnitus, muscle tension, asthma, blood pressure problems, all these things listed here and much, much more. That's quite a thing that I'm saying here. And as I say, that is actually, in a sense, a dangerous statement. I am, however, not saying the Bemer heals any of this. It doesn't. but it improves the microcirculation and it improves the oxygen extraction ability, and that gives hope for better ATP production and hence the body's self-regulating and self-healing system coming into action. That is surely not too difficult to understand. Now, is it a placebo effect? Let me put it to you this way. Placebo is always a factor in every treatment. When I go and visit the doctor because I have some dull pain here on the side, and he finds nothing and he says I'm 100% healthy, then the placebo effect makes me happy and I go home because I think I'm healthy. The fact that he didn't find the cause of my pain is really irrelevant. I feel happy because the doctor said there is nothing wrong with me. That's a placebo effect. So, if you believe in the Bemer, it will help. If you believe in the pill that you swallow, that will help. If you believe in the doctor who says something to you, then it'll help. So, there is always a placebo effect. But you know, the Bemer works on animals. There's no placebo here whatsoever. And we have our greater successes, I would say, on animals because an animal cannot talk, doesn't tell you anything about its symptoms, but you can see some of them, and you treat them with a Bemer, and you see what happens. And an animal shows you very quickly if they're well or not well. So we have had many, we treat a lot of horses, we treat a lot of dogs, and we've even treated crocodiles, although that wasn't very successful. Not because the guy who did the treatment was bitten, but a crocodile is a cold-blooded animal. But that's another story. What can we do for the healthy and the active? People like you and me who are possibly blessed with good health, is the Bemer any use for us? Of course it is. It's maintenance. Because I want to keep my mental and physical performance and zest for life. I want to be well. I want to have vitality and joy of life. And when I'm sick, I cannot have that. Yes, I'm getting older. I know that. And if you deny that, then have a look in the mirror and put a photograph of last year next to you. But we get older, but we would like to stay younger in terms of our ability mentally and physically. But one thing's for sure, the Bemer therapy must be the most cost-effective means of preventing sickness, staying healthy and improving the body's self-regulation ability. Because even though a Bemer might be a pricey item to purchase, in the end you can treat the whole family and visitors and the dog and the cat and the canary if you got one. Of course, there are many people who've got all sorts of ailments, especially chronic ailments, and they suffer and they're in hospital. You know, there are so many gadgets around them, and what do these things do? I'm sure they have a positive effect, but do they have a positive effect on the quality of life of the patient? I don't think so. So the Bemer can support all self-regulating parameters that improve self-healing. We've understood that. It also improves the microcirculation and the oxygen supply. And so it counters much of ailment-caused acidity. I haven't even talked about that, but when a cell is running anaerobically, in other words, lack of oxygen, it becomes acidic. And we all know that feeling when we do exercise that we haven't done for a long time, and we get this muscle pain, this muscular soreness. That's acidity. Those are hydrogen ions, and they are a result of running cells anaerobically. And the body is fantastic in that it can actually run without oxygen for a short while, but the price to pay is acidity. And if you are sick or very weak, then weak physically, then you will have a lot of acidity, and the Bemer helps the body to break down the acidity. Very important. And that is why we observe accelerated healing effects. Healing as diverse as fractures, wounds, surgical wounds, all sorts of things. And it improves the immune system. I personally haven't been ill now for years, and I'm on the Bemer for 13 years. And you know, maybe I'm just lucky. That's right, you could be. But so is my wife, so are all my children, and so are all the, not all, but most of the people who are on the Bemer regularly that I have close contact with. You know what's the best of all this? There are no negative side effects. Now, if something has no negative side effects, I am told it either does nothing or it's totally irrelevant. Everything has a negative side effect. That is not quite true, because the negative side effect we are so used to and indoctrinated with are negative side effects from medicine. And that's understandable. Look at the packaging that you get in a box of tablets. There are a lot of negative side effects. And I'm not knocking the pharmaceutical products here. What I'm saying is that is the state of the art of medicine. It can help and it does help in many cases, but there are consequences to it, especially in long term usage. That's why I like the American terminology. They don't call it pills, they call it drugs. Well, it is. Many people die of drugs, even medical drugs. And the other amazing thing is that it is compatible with every other medical therapy. Why? Because it doesn't interfere with anything. It only boosts the body's own defenses and self regulation ability. Full stop. How difficult is that to understand? And people who are super fit and super healthy, like athletes, why should they want to use it? Well, we've got a lot of rugby teams, which is a physical sport, very hard knocks there. And also, it increases performance. Why does it increase performance? Every doping athlete wants to get what? More oxygen into his or her system. And here, the Bemer is doing in a natural way. That's why it's not a doping device. And that is why the Olympic Committee has said, no, the Bemer is fine. And the Swiss Olympic team uses it. Many of the German Olympians use it. Soccer teams use it. Rugby teams use it. High performance tennis players, motorsport, you name it. Wherever there is a lot of physical exertion on the person, the Bemer does wonderful things for them. Also, athletes train a lot and they can regenerate much faster and heal much faster after injury. And again, in rugby, we see that a lot. It also saves your own energy for warming up. Why? Because if you lie on the Bemer, you've noticed that you feel a little bit of warmth. And that feeling of warmth is not because you're being cooked. It is because there is such a better microcirculation and circulation in general. And you know, if you have a massage or you rub yourself in with a product in South Africa called Deep Heat, then you feel warm. And that is just improved circulation. It also prevents some sports injuries because the body is much more agile, fitter, healthier. And the one thing that is very important, because you get people who say, but I don't feel anything, and they've been on the Bemer once or twice. Every time you use the Bemer, that's because it is a physical modality. It improves the physical vascular system. Every time you use the Bemer, there is an improvement. If you feel it or not, there is an improvement. It'll always improve the microcirculation, the oxygenation, the ATP production, the self-regulation. Now, there could be two reasons why you don't feel anything. Some people are more sensitive than others. Others have to use the Bemer for 4 weeks before they see anything. And others have suffered from their ailments for so long. They are so acidic that it takes the body half a year just to get rid of the acidity and then start on the self-healing program. Understand? So what the Bemer does is pretty simple. And the result is, in the end, we got better physical and mental performance, a lot more vitality, quality of life. And that's what I started off with. That's what we want. And that's why our body cries out for oxygen. We all want quality of life and good health. There is a new way of thinking about your health. You know, prior to Steve Jobs, nobody could care less about a home computer in a home, because what the heck are we going to do with this thing? We need a new way of thinking about computers, said Steve Jobs. And he said, let's have a computer in every home. And everybody laughed at him, especially IBM, and they almost went bankrupt before they made a turnaround. And look at our world today. And in such a similar way, I think we must think about our health. You are responsible for your health. I am responsible for my health. And the Bemer opens up a new way of life for everybody. Anybody who can lie down on a mat and switch on a button can have this today. No clutter, no issues. It's easy. No danger. It's safe. There are only one or two um, contraindications. And the one I mentioned already, that is the transplanted organs. You don't want to be on the Bemer when you've just had a new kidney, because we are boosting the immune system through the Bemer. And if that happens, then the rejection increases, the chance for rejection. So we don't want that. And the only other contraindication we are aware of is a fourth degree aneurysm, where you have a big blood bubble in one of the arteries that's just about to burst. And that wouldn't be funny. And in fact, I also say when people have a heart problem, or when there are pregnant women and they don't like the idea of lying on the mat, then go to a doctor. And if the doctor understands the Bemer, he will say, there is no risk here at all. And in fact, in South Africa, we had many pregnant women right throughout their pregnancy on the Bemer. But I say, from a commercial point of view, always, always get permission from your doctor. But of course, 90% of the doctors have never heard of the Bemer, and there is quite a bit of skepticism because it is a new modality. It's only 13 years old. It doesn't get taught at medical school what it does. And it is based on a technology which 20 years ago was sort of poo-pooed because nobody understood it. Nobody knew why it worked, when it worked, and it wasn't consistent and it wasn't quantifiable. That has all changed with the Bemer when in Germany, through Professor Kafka, the person who developed this originally, um, they looked at this closer and they said, what are the parameters that make these gadgets work or not work? And they came up with a scientific medical device called the Bemer, which, by the way, in Europe and South Africa is registered as a medical device. It's got a class 2A registration and classification. And the FDA in the United States is also looking at it very closely. And in fact, it has a classification there as well. It's as easy as lying down, as I said. I mean, it's a real no-brainer. For the people who've used it, in South Africa alone, we have probably distributed over 6,000 Bemers. And we did a survey about 2 or 3 years ago based on the old Bemer. And we had about a 97% hit rate that said, we're still using the Bemer. We still use it at least once a day. And there are at least 2 members of the family using it every day. Now, that's a remarkable sort of testimony for a device which is really so simple to use. No negative side effects, excellent for home treatment, easy to use. I mean, what more do we want? It's like the first Apple. It was a bit easier to use than my Apple that I've got now. I'm still learning. Bemer vascular therapy. It's a physical therapy. It's a gentle physical therapy. You do not feel anything when you're lying on it. But I tell you what, it's like the original PCs, the original Apples. It's emerging. It's emerging medicine. It'll take a couple of years before it gets taught at medical school. But the movement is starting already, definitely. We're on a mission here. We're on a mission to make the Bemer more known. We will take any constructive criticism. We will try very much, very hard to answer all questions of a scientific nature. And there are smarter people than me working on this all the time in institutions in Europe and in hospitals and other places of learning in Europe, at least. So all I can say to you guys, try it out. Why don't you rent it? I mean, a PowerPoint presentation is one thing, but in the end, you must try and use it yourself, see if it works for yourself. So you can rent it. I'm sure you can rent it even in the United States, or you can certainly rent it here in South Africa. Just contact us. There's our email address, info@bemer.co.za, and see the results for yourself. And then I've got, but be prepared. You will want to have one after that. I can almost, not promise, guarantee you that. There should be one in every home, and after I'd written it there on the slide this afternoon, I actually struck it out and I put there will be one in every home. And that is really what we believe, um, not just for commercial reasons, believe me, but because it is a device whose time has come. In today's world, where a lot of stuff is done at home, look what your computer can do that 30 years ago nobody ever even dreamt that you would do at home. You do it on your computer today.